starting to fish a little bit and enjoy the lake. You see them all piled up at the bridges and the boats start streaming in, guys getting their equipment out the first time. And when you get that equipment out the first time, make sure you're checking all your safety equipment, that sort of stuff. Make sure those fire extinguishers are still good. Make sure all the equipment's still on board, that sort of thing. So just a great time to go check it out. Personally, in my personal boat, I got out, was working great. And then all of a sudden the throttle wouldn't work. And it was just stayed at a high throttle. So I just had to kick it into neutral and shut it off real quick. And I had mice in my engine. Shoot some wires. So working that part out in my personal boat. So again, pop that stuff off, take a look at it before you go out, make sure, everything's in working order before you hit the water. I could have had a really bad situation happen with no throttle response.
Parts of Clinton Lake are still cold, but there is, of course, the warm water discharge, and Captain Williamson indicates you can get up to the DeWitt Bridge, but you cannot cross under. However, he points out that warm water does spill over, so fishing is very good on that part of the lake.
That's what kind of makes Clinton Lake an enigma with the hot water. On the right up next to the hot water discharge on the east side of DeWitt Bridge, you can't go past that, but that water's probably getting in the 60s, and then you go all the way over to the west side access or up to North Fork, and the water's probably maybe hitting 40 degrees now because the ice just came off of it. So there's all sorts of the fishing is different on which side of the lake you're on. Yeah, the water flows out of it, so you can fish right up on the west side of the DeWitt Bridge and fish all that you want, but you just can't go under the bridge until April 15th. The thing opens up. April 1st.
Captain Williamson also points out Weldon Springs State Park has been a bevy of activity and called it a hidden gem in DeWitt County. We'll have more with Captain Williamson in the days ahead on the exclusive trout fishing program that Weldon Springs offers. Mount Pulaski Schools Superintendent Fred Lamke has been outspoken about his desire for local control in matters related to COVID, and he and his peers in the last month have been given that control back. Reflecting on the last month, Lamke indicates enforcement of masks went away in his district in mid-January in an effort to have some say in the mandates from the state of Illinois. Once the ruling started to fall in the favor of Illinois parents and schools, he says it was like all their problems just went away.
We were part of the lawsuit. We had, I believe, 2 families in our district that jumped on the case with Mr. DeVore. And from my perspective, in everything that went through, they did exactly what you should do. They went to the course of legal action to try and get this to change. And that's the way change happens. I don't have a bit of problem with what they did because they're doing what they felt was right for the family and our community. And as that lawsuit went through, we really had very little action in it because we put ourselves in a group that was represented by our property casualty insurance company. And we would get updates, but it didn't really have a large effect on us day to day from that perspective. We were still dealing with mask mandates and questions and concerns and those things back and forth. We did reach a point in January where our board took a step and they relieved teachers of the responsibility of enforcing masks. Basically, they wanted them to focus on instruction and education. And that created some, there's some people on both sides of that didn't like losing the control of that, but others who appreciated the fact they didn't have to worry about it anymore. So the month of January, we were in effect trying to do some different things and have some local control. Now, when the corner turned the 1st of February with the decision coming down from the courts, it was kind of odd, but it's almost like all of our trouble just kind of went away. We didn't have conflicts in the community anymore. We weren't dealing with problems in the school. And slowly through February, the masks just started falling off. I think people were a little apprehensive at first in some cases. But as we stand today here in the middle of March, there's just a handful of teachers and students that still wear masks, and they're fully respected. They don't have any problems. That's their right to choose to do so. So it feels like it's 2019.
Lamke believes local control has now become an issue for Illinois parents because the state stripped districts of their ability to decide for themselves how to handle COVID protocols the last few years.
I don't believe lawmakers are coming out to try and hurt students or schools. They just don't have a working knowledge of what it takes to implement these things they're pushing down on. And they don't understand the stress it puts on a school district to get these things done. And I think it's that factor. That's what we're missing, is that conduit between education and our legislature to understand what is possible and what is not. And that's one thing I know during the mandate we've been pushing for, to have better communications with the state board and the people that represent them. I think it's like anything else. It's something that the public has taken for granted because the schools are always there, and we will always teach your kids. Our doors will always be open, and we will take care of those things. And then during the pandemic, that wasn't the case. And I think people came to realize that, wow, what the school districts are doing for us and how difficult this job is. When parents had to start teaching kids at home remotely, it really opened the eyes of people. And it's not that they don't appreciate it, but it's like anything else in the world. Once we've gotten used to it, we take it for granted. And I do agree, Seth, that now parents are seeing that, and they don't like the fact that we lost control, that we couldn't make decisions to have our doors open in our school districts. And I do think that's going to garner a little more support for our schools, and in the future, maybe even having more local control when it comes down to mandates.
Lamke believes you will start to see more and more school leaders speaking out against mandates that don't make sense or are unfunded and push the burden they create on Illinois schools, administrators, and educators. It is 17 minutes after the hour here on this Monday morning. Again, we start the day under partly cloudy skies, 49 degrees. It feels like 45. Plenty of news still to get to coming up on the morning show. It's 18 minutes after the hour here on this Monday morning. Again, I'm Seth Lawrence with you folks today for this expanded local newscast. Coverage of the morning show streams to Facebook and YouTube. It's brought to you by Peterson Insurance, your Peking Insurance agent in Clinton. And coverage of news is brought to you by Baum Chevrolet Buick in Clinton, your Silverado headquarters. They're calling it a celebration of modern agriculture on the National Mall. Around 30 exhibitors set up in the heart of the nation's capital today and tomorrow to coincide with National Ag Day.
Well, I'll tell you, as you can imagine, organizing, dozens of pieces of equipment and dozens of organizations around equipment on the National Mall is not without its logistical challenges. But it's also a labor of love. Because those of us that are involved in agriculture have been dreaming of doing something like this for years. To be able to tell our story, tell the story of modern agriculture to regulators and policymakers, I couldn't be more excited. I'm sitting here in Washington, D.C. right now as the machines are moving in, and I just giddy thinking about having these conversations with senators and representatives and cabinet heads to talk about what's agriculture is doing right now to feed the world in a very sustainable manner.
Kurt Blades is helping organize the event. He's also with the Association of Equipment Manufacturers. Lawmakers are working over the state budget earlier this year than normal, and it's leaving lawmakers with a little less information than usual. When crafting a budget in May, state income tax receipts are known because of the April 15th income tax deadline. However, this year, House Democrat Greg Harris says mid-March is not as clear how the state is doing, and there are plenty of trouble spots for the economy to come.
No one anticipated we were going to have the war in the Ukraine. And you're beginning to see already signs that this could have really negative effects on the economy. Increase in gas prices. You're seeing major drops in the stock market, and that has significant effects on capital gains taxes. It has significant effects on corporate income taxes. We're starting to see potential softening in sales taxes, as families are starting to have to make decisions. So
budget discussions were moved up this spring because of the June primary. Governor J.B. Pritzker is announcing a new children's behavioral health initiative The idea is to evaluate current practices and make sure it's easier for families to access the support their child needs, according to the governor.
Maybe your child's developmental disability was evident from birth. You may have learned from a local school counselor that your child needs more specialized support than the district can provide. Or maybe your child experienced a devastating mental health episode and had to be hospitalized.
The effort will be led by child welfare expert Dana Weiner and involves several state agencies.
What we need is an intentional, coordinated strategy to get families the help they need for kids who are struggling. Our current system is difficult to navigate and does not provide families with consistent, transparent solutions to the challenges they face.
Areas to be examined include eligibility for levels of care, barriers to programs, and the needs of kids with various behavioral health concerns. A report is due at the end of the year. Scammers are already using the war in Ukraine as a way of tricking people out of their money. These criminals pay close attention to natural disasters and current events. Experts at the Better Business Bureau want you to be generous if you're so inclined, but keep your guard up for those who are looking at this humanitarian disaster as a way to make a buck. People who want to help victims are being urged to donate to the Salvation Army, Catholic Relief Services, or other legitimate agencies. The BBB's Don O'Brien says every disaster is followed by crooks and scammers, often utilizing crowdfunding sites.
In the past, anybody could just throw something up on one of those sites and start collecting money. But now, whether I don't know if they've added staff to this, but we have been in contact. Better Business Bureau has with specifically GoFundMe about some of these campaigns that go on, and they are starting to verify those. So if you can find a verified campaign on a crowdfunding site like GoFundMe, you could know that actual family is seeking that help and will get that money.
He says you should be cautious when giving online to unfamiliar charities. Beware of spam messages and emails that claim to link to a relief organization. You can find a reference of legitimate charities at give.org. Lawmakers are working on bills to close loopholes in Illinois sexual assault laws. One measure, sponsored by Representative Katie Stewart of Collinsville, is based on a case in another state. A young woman unknowingly slept with a man pretending to be her boyfriend. He was charged and later acquitted.
Because the laws did not cover sexual assault by deception. She was considered to have given consent because she thought it was a different person. It's no wonder that we don't know how many survivors of sexual assault there really are, because laws like this are why lots of survivors don't come forward.
The first piece of legislation is sponsored by Arlington Heights Representative Mark Walker, prompted by the case of one of his constituents. The woman got drunk, blacked out, and was raped. Her attacker was never charged because she ingested the alcohol on her own.
The absurdity of that to me is just stunning. An unconscious person raped. And it's not a crime because she drank, as opposed to was secretly given a pill.
Stewart's bill makes this a felony crime in Illinois. Another clarifies state law so that a person is unable to give consent, even if they are unconscious because of something they drank or took themselves. If you're eager to get to work on the garden already, a University of Illinois Extension horticulturalist is offering some ideas on where to start. First, you can begin with cleanup, clearing dead branches, twigs, and pine cones. Old perennial growth can be left alone until temperatures are consistently in the 50s, offering protection from late frost and rabbits. It's also a good time to do some pruning, says the U of I Extension's Richard Henschel.
Everybody needs to remember that where you make the cut is where you're going to generate new growth. So if you're trying to make a shrub a little fuller, cutting it in the top of the canopy is not going to generate a full body. You need to take branches out down further into the body of the shrub or even at the ground.
Henschel says some parts of the state can start planting.
If you've got summer flowering bulbs, they need to go in the ground. Just recognize that summer flowering bulbs prefer a bit warmer soil temperature. Yesterday, our soils were really only in the low 40s, so they need to sit a bit and wait till the soils get up into the 50s before they go out into the ground.
Henschel adds, in some areas, you can probably start some planting of those flowering bulbs. He says soil temperatures need to be in the 50s, though, to have the best chance. Details of a USDA grant program designed to develop additional fertilizer production domestically will be announced later this year. Rod Bain has the details.
As fertilizer and availability of fertilizer ingredients tighten, prices for inputs have jumped, also increasing farmers' concerns about fertilizer costs.
We get it. We know that you're challenged with fertilizer costs. There are things we can do, things we can't do, obviously, because it's a pretty big problem involving lots of different moving parts. But the things that we have control over, research, RMA products, conservation options, resources for additional capacity are things we are doing.
And Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack recently provided an example of how additional capacity can be obtained during this year's Commodity Classic, a new grant program to be offered by the Agriculture Department.
We are announcing an effort to jumpstart independent production of fertilizer made in America with innovation, utilizing and impacting and assisting sustainably active farming operations.
USDA will make available later this summer $250 million in Commodity Credit Corporation funding for grants that provide gap financing to bring new, independent, domestic production capacity online.
I think we have to recognize that we're too reliant on outside sources of fertilizer and the ingredients for fertilizer, that we rely on countries that may or may not agree with us on a variety of issues.
The secretary noted the global fertilizer production system has provided greater efficiency, but lacks in resiliency in lieu of supply chain disruptions. He adds the new grant program will support fertilizer production that is not only independent and domestic, but that is also sustainable, innovative, and farmer-focused. Prior to details on the application process being announced this summer,
We'll be making a request for information. How should we structure this? We're telling the market, we're telling the world, there's $250 million of grant resource available. What would you do with it? And then when folks come back with ideas and thoughts about what they would do with it, we'll then structure and frame the program accordingly. It's similar to what we did with the Partnership for Climate Smart Commodities.
the first awards from this new grant program are expected to be announced before the end of this year. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
It is 29 minutes after the hour here on this Monday morning. Coverage of the morning show streams to Facebook and YouTube. It's brought to you by Peterson Insurance, your Peking Insurance agent in Clinton, and the WHOW Morning Show News is brought to you by Baum Chevrolet Buick in Clinton, your Silverado headquarters. Good news.